We are beginning our fall sermon series this morning. The title of the series is Who Do You Say That I Am? Over the course of the weeks between now and the end of November, we will be exploring different identities of Jesus as described by the writers of the New Testament. Some Sundays, the identity will be a title or a name that was given to Jesus or that others called him. Other Sundays, it will be an activity in which Jesus frequently engaged. One of the most common ways in which Jesus practiced his ministry, for example, was by teaching. And he was called teacher by many in his day. So today we begin our series by looking at Jesus the teacher. Our text is Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. You are invited to follow along in your pew Bibles on page 785. It's in the New Testament. Let's listen for God's word to us today. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The word of the Lord. I've been doing some thinking recently about the future. Now that I've been here a year, some of you have even asked me, "Ben, what do you see in Westminster's future? What's your vision for what our church might become?" It's a good question. And I hope you will not be disappointed this morning when I do not roll out for you a 5-point plan about our church's future, but that does not mean that I haven't been thinking about it. I have. I've been thinking about it a lot. Any number of thoughts have crossed my mind. When I think about our church's future, I sometimes think about all the kids that we have around here. Anybody want to take a shot at how many children, 9th grade and below, we have at Westminster? 663 by latest count. It's just enormous. And all the teenagers coming to youth group, and how fortunate we are to have those young people and the growth that this church has experienced in recent years. I want to make sure, when it comes to our future, I want to make sure that we are prepared for that growth to continue, and that we are able, in terms of staffing, in terms of ministries, that we are able to welcome and plug in all those who come through our doors, as well as staying very connected to one another and to all the old-time members who have built this church up through the years. You know what else I think about when I consider our future? I think about our rich history with mission and outreach to our neighbors, and how we can build on that history in our future. I think about the word open, the word energetic. This is an energetic bunch, and I want it to stay that way. I think about the words radical hospitality. When it comes to our future, I want us to continue to be an open and energetic congregation that offers radical hospitality to all of God's children. Now, I've got other thoughts about our future, but this is not, in fact, a sermon today about my vision. This is a sermon about Jesus' vision. In our text for today, Jesus goes up on a mountain and he presents his vision of the future. At least, I think Jesus was talking about the future. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." 9 blessings. We know them as the Beatitudes. Some of you may have memorized those verses as a child growing up in Sunday school. It is a beautiful picture that Jesus paints, and I'm assuming that he's talking about the future. As in, one day the meek will inherit the earth. One day those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled. Jesus is talking about one day, don't you think? I mean, surely Jesus isn't talking about today, a brutal war in Syria, largest refugee crisis since World War II. No way Jesus means today. Do you think he's talking about today? Did you know that some people think Jesus did not mean tomorrow or the future when he spoke these words, but meant today? The Jesuit priest Gregory Boyle is one of those. He puts it like this: the original language of the Beatitudes should not be rendered as "blessed are the peacemakers" or "blessed are those who struggle for justice." Greater precision in translation, he says, would be to say, you're in the right place when you struggle for justice. You're in the right place if you work for peace. The Beatitudes, he says, is geography. It tells us where to stand. Now, I got to admit, I like that. The Beatitudes tell us where to stand. They tell us we're in the right place when we stand with the meek in the mourning. We're in the right place when we're on the side of the peacemakers and the pure in heart. I like all that, but now I feel conflicted because Jesus is beginning to sound not like visionary Jesus, but like hard and demanding Jesus, like he's trying to teach us something. You see, there's an argument to be made that the Beatitudes are not at all about tomorrow, but all about today, because they introduce the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is all about ethics. You remember the Sermon on the Mount, right? You have heard it said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." That's a piece of cake, right? How many of you on your list of things to do today are planning to go out and love your enemies this afternoon? I see no hands in the air. Never mind our enemies. How about loving a stranger? How about loving somebody you don't know, weren't planning on knowing, but that's the very person God wants you to get to know? It happened in a mainline church, not too different than ours. They were all going around the room telling why they enjoyed being part of that church. Some said they liked the fellowship. Some said they had friends there. Others said the music was fabulous. "Part of me hates this church," one young woman piped up. Well, that got everybody's attention. "Before I joined this church," she said, "my life was my life. I was fairly content with myself. Then the church took me to Haiti and made me stand near people who are dying because of their poverty, yet who were also undeniably richer in faith than I would ever be. I could have had a fairly happy life without the church," she said. "Now those strangers in Haiti have become my obsession. I'm thinking about them every day as if they were my family. I've got the church to blame for that." The Beatitudes are geography. They tell us where to stand. The church took me to Camp Thornwell and had me work on behalf of children who have had an uphill battle their entire lives. The church took me to the 3rd floor of Westminster on an interfaith housing week to stand next to families who are experiencing homelessness so that they would know they're not in this life alone. The church took me to the Dominican Republic. The church took me to Cuba. The church took me to a Just Faith small group. And after a couple of months of spiritual self-examination, you're now working with formerly incarcerated individuals who teach you as much as you give to them. The Beatitudes are geography. They tell us where to stand. All of which is fine and good, but it does not resolve this tension between tomorrow and today. There is this day-to-day tension I feel about, well, I can just put this off until tomorrow. Does anybody here have anything that you like to put off until tomorrow? I've got a few of those things. I've got a few. And never mind the tension that's in this text. When we come to church, we're not just supposed to be filled with hard and demanding all the time. Church is supposed to be a place that fills us, that recreates us, that gives us the energy to go out and serve God and love our neighbor. And you never know how God is going to work to fill you when you enter this room. There was a time in one of my former congregations when a member came up to me after worship, and she said, "Ben, please don't take offense when you see my husband sleeping through your sermons. He just doesn't sleep well at night, and sometimes church is the only place where he can get a good 20 minutes of rest." I wasn't offended at all. Didn't Jesus also say, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest"? What do we do with that tension between tomorrow and today? If you're anything like me, you don't like living with tension. So I tend to throw away the tension, try to resolve the tension. What if that tension between tomorrow and today is God's very gift to us right now, prodding us, nudging us, keeping us from standing in the place where we say, I've got this following Jesus thing all figured out. Years ago, a clergy person wrote, "It has taken Christianity almost 2,000 years to accomplish what it has. The teachings of Christ take time to come to earth." And another member of the clergy issued a reply. That reply went like this: "It is strangely irrational to say that there is something in the very flow of time that will inevitably cure all ills. Actually, time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively, for ill will or for good." Some of you may recognize that reply. It came from the pen of Martin Luther King Jr. and was written while he sat in a jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama, over 50 years ago. King said that what was most baffling to him was not the vitriol and hate of the white racist. It was the lukewarm response of the white moderate. "We must use time creatively," King wrote, "and forever realize that the time is always ripe to do right." I think King might have said that Jesus meant today. Do you think Jesus meant today when he gave those beautiful words of the Beatitudes? Be careful, be careful. As soon as you say that Jesus meant today, you've got to deal with these verses. "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account." Well, isn't that going to make your day? I mean, now I hope that Jesus did not mean today, because being persecuted for Jesus, being reviled for Jesus, this is not a part of my plan. It's not a part of my vision. It's not a part of my picture of what's going to happen in the future for our church. It sounds like Jesus is telling us to enter the fray, to get into the battle, to stand on the side of the oppressed and the downtrodden, even if it costs us more than we really want to pay. Like followers of Jesus are supposed to almost be zealous for the poor and are supposed to crave justice like food, like we cannot survive without it. Look, I grew up Presbyterian. That means I'm a fan of moderation. I am not a big fan of zealotry. I don't know about you, but when I get home from church today, I'm planning on having a pretty moderate afternoon. I'm going to go to the grocery store, hope to catch a little football on TV, maybe even catch a nap. Is that such a bad thing? Surely I'm not alone in this. See, there's this pretty large part of me that hopes Jesus did not mean today, because today puts demands on my energy, on my time, on my life. In fact, here's the scary part. If Jesus meant today, it's not just that my life could be inconvenienced this afternoon. It's that Jesus might change my life this afternoon. The Presbyterian pastor Tom R., who was one of Lee's pastors growing up, he tells the following story of what happened in one of his former churches. It was time for the church's stewardship campaign. And that particular year, that church decided they would do one of those campaigns that was an every member canvass. In other words, every member of the church would get a personal visit from somebody on the stewardship team. And so the elders who were in charge of this, they all gathered one evening, and these note cards were put on tables. The note cards had every family or every member in the church, their name was written on one of those note cards, and they were all spread out on all those tables. And the elders who were there were picking names of people that they already knew, right? Because they wanted to go visit people that they already knew. Well, Peter, one of the elders, was running late, and he got there late, and he got a name on a note card that he did not know. It was Rebecca. He asked Tom, his pastor, about Rebecca. Tom said he didn't know Rebecca either, but Peter, you should still go visit her. So Peter goes to visit, pulls up to her house. The yard is a mess. There's weeds everywhere, lawn needs mowing, house was peeling paint. It looked like nobody lived there. He walks up, knocks on Rebecca's door. Door opens, but only enough for Rebecca to see through the little crack and to be able to look at Peter. Yes, Rebecca, I'm Peter. I'm from the church. I don't go to that church anymore. Well, that's fine, but I just wanted to check and see how you're doing. I don't go there. Well, okay, I just wanted to stop by. Thanks for coming. And she shut the door. Peter thought, well, Tom said to visit. He didn't say I actually had to go inside. So he left. The next day, Peter's back at work. It was getting cold that time of year. Peter, in his office, had a little space heater that he used to warm himself with, and he just couldn't get out of his head what he had seen the previous day. You see, when Rebecca opened the door with that chain on the door, just peering out at Peter, he noticed that she was wearing a coat. Not a coat outside, a coat inside her house. So he went by her house again after work, knocks on the door. She opens the door. It's Peter. She looks at him. You know you've already been here, right? You don't have that Alzheimer's, do you? No, but I've got a space heater with me, and I was just wondering if you might like to use it. There was this long pause. You reckon you can show me how to use it? So Peter went inside. Inside was no better than outside. Rebecca was a hoarder. But amidst all the junk, it was clear to Peter from a couple of things he saw that in a previous life, Rebecca had been a dancer. Remnants of her old life were stacked in the house, and it was also clear that most likely no one besides Rebecca had been in that house for years. So Peter showed her how to use the heater. And a couple days later, he's out buying groceries, and he found himself, while he's in the supermarket, thinking about Rebecca. He bought more groceries than he needed, and he drove to her place from the supermarket with a bag of groceries. Rebecca, it's Peter. You want your heater back? No, I was just at the store, picked up some extra things, thought you might want them. Peter said he found himself heading over to Rebecca's house every month or so. He never really decided to do it, just found himself doing it. Cleaned up her yard. He tried to clean up the inside of her house. She would not let him do that. This went on for about a year and a half, and then one day Rebecca died. The church had a service for her. No family was there, only a handful of people, and Peter was there. About 2 months later, Tom R. received a letter from the attorney who handled Rebecca's estate. The attorney said that he had received a postcard from Rebecca earlier that year. The postcard directed that at the time of her death, any proceeds from her estate should go to the church. Because, she wrote, when everyone else had forgotten me, Peter, that man from the church, he refused to leave me alone. Tom R. said to Peter, "You were the church to her." And he told Peter that there was a check to the church for $1,742. Peter said, "No, Tom. It's just that whenever I kept going back to that house, it was as clear to me as it ever has been that Jesus was in that house." Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Do you think Jesus meant today, I've got a list of things planned to do today, right? I'm going to go home, I'm going to skip that nap, but I'm going to take care of this and that. See, I'm on the fence when it comes to today. Can't I live out the Beatitudes in my life tomorrow? Or if I don't have time tomorrow, can't I make it next week? Surely Jesus will understand about next week and not today. I'm on the fence when it comes to the timing of all this. And in fact, come to think of it, if this is all about geography, the fence is not a bad place to be. Does anybody else here like being on the fence? I like being on the fence. That's my favorite geographical location. Staying on the fence allows me to consider the possibility that Jesus meant tomorrow or today, and I can decide depending on how I feel. Should I forgive today? Should I give generously today? Should I inconvenience my life to make someone else's life better today? Should I pick up somebody's cross and carry it today? I like to sit on the fence. Problem is, right after these verses, Jesus says to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world." Man, I hate it. I hate it when Jesus tells me to get off the fence.